I could invite the first question, and that is from Charles Nisbet. Thank you, Charles.
Good afternoon, Chairman.
Good afternoon. And if as I mentioned, people could talk straight close to the microphone, and that way we can make sure that everybody hears.
Is that
and if
right?
anybody, that's great. And if anybody can't hear at the back, if you could just stick your hand up, then I can see. Okay.
I am concerned that there is no clarity on how far city deal money may be spent on things which aren't actually transport. I gather that transport infrastructure is included. I'm uncomfortable about the idea of whether planting trees would go down well with an auditor under the heading of transport infrastructure. So may I please receive an assurance that the Greater Cambridge City deal has the legal authority to spend any part of its funding on providing trees to replace those that it intends to remove from Milton Road or Histon Road. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. If I could ask Graham Hughes to start, and I'll make a comment because I think the board needs to record its view on this as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman. The simple answer to the question is yes. So the City deal is delivering or will deliver the transport schemes under powers delegated to it by the County Council. And those powers allow us to do planting, tree planting, etc. within the highway, which is where these schemes will sit. So absolutely, yes, the City deal does have the power. Bear in mind that planting and tree planting would be part of, or should I say, an integral part of the transport scheme. So that gives you reassurance.
And if I could add that, you know, as a board, obviously, if we're proposing schemes and we realise that some people don't agree with some of the schemes, and obviously we're still out to consultation through the workshops, that quality design, including landscaping and trees, is integral to the delivery of any proposed scheme. So we've had discussions, I think, with the Department for Transport on the overall principles, and this is an integral part of the schemes that we would propose. If we go ahead and actually implement them, we would stick to ensuring high quality landscaping, and we've got that discussion later on the agenda.
Thank you, Chairman. My question has been answered.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I would like to preface my question. Since I set it in last week, the Cambridge News has done a two-page spread on tackling congestion in Cambridge, and it has diagrams which show the modelling used to determine which roads would benefit from peak time road closure. However, my question relates specifically to the leaflet in the survey, which is currently out for a preliminary period of engagement and further consultation on specific elements in the package planned in due course. So with regard to peak time congestion control points, I represent the Madingley Road Area Residents Association, and we think that these measures will cause chaos within the city, the surrounding streets and the M11 as drivers seek alternative routes. The lack of detail makes it difficult to respond when Grange Road, which is a pretty major road, is not even shown. Why are there no PCCPs on the roads in the north and the northwest of the city? The arterial roads in this section, most of which are being considered for bus lanes, lead to the inner ring road. Is this because you have not yet planned the position of the control points in this quadrant, or are you planning some other measures for this part of the city?
Thanks for your question. Graham Hughes?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, as the questioner says, we're at an early stage, so there is a proposal for an 8-point plan, and as you say, the consultation is now live and comments are being made on that. The PCCP element, that's the control closure points, they've come about as a result of quite a lot of modelling that has demonstrated that if a series of closure points, and there's still a decision to be taken by this board about precisely what that 8-point plan goes forward, but what the modelling has shown is that if a series of closures are put in place within the city, because of the way that the network operates, there's quite a lot of cross-city traffic as well as traffic moving within the city. What that will mean is, if you have a series of closure points, whether they be north or south, but we focus in terms of the greatest impact on the south, what you actually have is a city-wide impact. And as you say, the modelling that was outlined in the Cambridge News has demonstrated that broader impact. So it's certainly not a case of having just not got to the north yet. What we put forward technically to the board, and is now under consultation, are a series of closure points. I've got some maps here if you or anybody else would like a slightly larger version of where indicatively they are. What the modelling shows is that there will be some roads that see increases in traffic, but the majority of roads will see a decrease in traffic across the city. We've targeted 10 to 15% at least reduction in traffic, because that is the difference between non-school times and school times, and so the modelling indicates that can be achieved by the set of closures that are currently proposed. So all of that though still has to be developed, so this board will have to make a formal decision at some point on the precise form of the closures indeed if they're introduced. But actually the package we put forward we think will be effective citywide, so it's, it's a complete package as it stands. I think just as a final point, it's just worth pointing out that it very much, given the 8-point plan, is predicated on the fact that if certain closures are put in place, people will change their behaviour, there will be rerouting, but there will be much better public transport services. And so we would anticipate effectively creating a sort of virtuous circle of people making different choices, which then will free up the road network even more and then create better conditions. So that's the overall plan.
So I'll ask Graham to share the indicative plan, and I think the board had a look at a couple of different combinations of where these control points could operate, and we had evidence of the different traffic impacts from the modelling. And so this is the basis of the proposals is that would achieve the significant impact in peak time car movement, which would assist us achieve reliable bus services and thereby offer alternatives to people other than driving into the city by car at peak times.
Thank you. I will study this.
Okay, and I think there are 18 exhibitions this month, and one of those is in Newnham at West Road, I think, maybe, is it the Constable?
Yes, I've got a note of those. There's one next week in the centre of town.
So, and several of us will be attending them and listening to the public's views at those events as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
So thanks, Eric.
Okay, I'm asking a question on behalf of Eric Devissa. According to an article in the Cambridge News on the 30th of August, roads in the north of the city, quote, are expected to see big decreases in traffic when some of the central roads are closed at peak times. This is excellent news. If, in addition, commuter parking is also prevented across the city, and commuters do change their habits by changing to cycles and the bus, there will be no valid reason to widen Histon or Milton roads or to have bus lanes. The roadworks on Histon and Milton Road are planned to start in 2017 and 2018 respectively, before the trialling of the road closures begins. His question is, can the plans to widen Histon Road and Milton Road be delayed until the second tranche, that is, after the road closures have been trialled, to see whether widening the road, bus lanes and chopping down the trees is absolutely necessary?
Thank you. Thanks for asking on behalf of Eric. I just want to take the other 3 questions as well.
Right.
Okay. Thanks. So I've got question 8 from Barbara Taylor.
Thank you. I have that article in question, the Cambridge Evening News article, that is. Right, the Cambridge News reported a couple of days ago, 30th of August, that assuming that the proposed peak time road closures will go ahead as proposed, roads like Milton Road as well as Mattingley Road and Histon Road are, and as has already been quoted, are expected to see big reductions in traffic. And I think, Graham Hughes, you mentioned earlier that these proposals would be in between about 10 and 15%, is that correct? Yes, 10 and 15% reduction, which is quite a large reduction. Assuming that the county will agree to a citywide neighbourhood parking scheme, in the hope that this will further reduce cars coming into Cambridge looking for free parking by some considerable percentage, and if school-run traffic were to be robustly addressed as well, it will add a further double-digit reduction. Given all of this, can the board finally answer the question people have asked time and time again? Why spend our public money on expensive, damaging, unproven and resoundingly unpopular bus lanes on Milton and Histon roads before the evidence of congestion busting measures can be assessed? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think just listening to the questions, if I start off, I think principally trying to address question 6 on behalf of Eric de Visser and question 11, which I think are essentially covering the same sort of territory, but then, as you say, Chairman, there were some specific other points from the other questions. I think the fundamental point, so I take those two questions as asking why are we doing or proposing things like Milton Road and Histon Road in advance of the congestion control measures. And from our point of view, the simple answer to that is that we looked at the problems of Cambridge, and our view is that there needs to be a package of measures to address those problems. So whilst managing congestion is a significant part of that, I think we've always argued, certainly I've always argued, that actually there has to be a combination of demand management, but also improvement in capacity for the sustainable modes of travel, cycling, walking, buses in particular. And I think the principal reason we say that is that we are clearly dealing with a set of issues today, but we are dealing also with a growth agenda that is within the local plans, currently planned up to 2031, and we assume it will probably go on. So it's going to be a long-term issue. So we are not just looking at the issues we have today, but also when the significant new settlements, Waterbeach, for example, out to the west, subject to the local plan process when they come on stream. So it's actually a long-term issue we're looking at addressing rather than just a short-term issue. We think also in the short term, and this touches on a couple of the other questioners' points, whilst the proposals that we're putting forward in terms of demand management, which will deal with peak hour issues if eventually implemented, there are also issues over a much wider period as well that we believe can be addressed by prioritising buses and improving facilities for cyclists and pedestrians and allowing those users to effectively and efficiently get into Cambridge when they need to. And during the most busy periods, the congestion control points will assist that process as well. Which I may then sort of, I think, leads me on to a couple of points that Mr. Danish raised. And I think there is certainly a lot of truth in the point that the bus companies need to change the way they manage their operations. So we've long had a debate around ticketing. There are issues about how people board and leave the buses. But our analysis is clear that that is not the only problem. And so if any of us talk to the bus operator, if you just observe what is going on the street, on some of the busiest roads in Cambridge, it is not just an issue of boarding and disembarking. There is a very significant problem of congestion. And as the road network operates at the moment, the buses are, if you like, caught up in exactly the same congestion as the cars currently get caught up in. We know from data from Stagecoach that buses can sometimes take almost an hour to get from the railway station to the city centre, and that most certainly isn't due to people getting off the buses, that is due to the buses just simply being stuck in traffic congestion. That's reflected in the bus reliability figures that are reproduced in the documentation. So there is a real issue to deal with, and I think there is also a real issue in terms of improving cycling facilities, because we know from experience that where high quality, preferably segregated and safe cycling facilities are put in place, people will cycle actually quite remarkably long distances. I'm a keen cyclist myself, but people in very, very large numbers are cycling in from Cottenham, Rampton, even St Ives on the busway, and we know from our other routes that we put in place that if you put those facilities in, then you can really get significant increases in usage. And a lot of that comes alongside the bus lanes. Just a couple of other points. I think Barbara Taylor raised the issue about schools and about control parking. Certainly parking is an issue. It's a significant part of the overall package within the eight points about managing on-street parking, parking generally to encourage people not to commute. There's currently a process underway to identify a new parking policy that's looking citywide, working jointly between the County Council and the City Council to see how that can be implemented as soon as possible. And then I think just a sort of a side on the schools issue. Barbara, you mentioned the point about getting to grips, or I don't remember what words you used, but with the school's travel problem. I think, again, I've said this a couple of times, there's a broader issue with the schools. It's less about the schools and more about what the parents are doing when the schools are down. So we think that there could be an influence in trying to change the way the schools operate in terms of start and finish times, for example. But actually, it's more the parents and what they're doing, or are they off at the same time as the children, that actually is causing the issue. So we don't think just simply dealing with the schools is by any way going to deal with the broader problem. So we think, again, we need this combined package to deal with the issues. And as you point out, the Cambridge News, using our modelling, yes, it is shown that there could be significant increases across the city. That's what we're targeting. We've targeted the 10 to 15% because that would replicate what happens in school downtimes. But again, we need to get to that point if we can and to hold it. We think, again, to get there, we need a balanced package, not just one or the other, demand management or alternatives.
Yeah, I think the board's view essentially reiterates what I think was a reasonably cogent response there from Graham. So it's
Can we come back to that? Because I'm sorry, he's talking about what is the situation now, but we're saying that if you bring in all these other measures, that with the 10 to 15% reduction, then the traffic will be less.
Well, I mean the approach that is being adopted by the City Deal is a combination of measures to reduce demand, but those demand measures, Mrs. Taylor, focus on the peak time, and there are measures which we believe are necessary as well, which are subject to consultation on local schemes. The benefit of having the information and data back on what the impact is going to be of the demand management measures is we'll be in a stronger position to, by January, early next year, to actually model and be clear about what we think will be the impact of that package. If that package is implemented, it's still going to be subject to trial period, and what that means is that we will continue to learn. But I think fundamentally the board's view is that it isn't feasible to put this off until 2020 or beyond, as some might wish, simply because we believe that there's a need for both peak time congestion control, but measures that assist both at the peak time and through the day. Councillor Burkitt wanted to add.
I just want to add that one of the themes that's coming through from the questioners, which I'm very pleased to hear, is the faith that people have got in the Cambridge Access proposals, the PCCPs and the workplace parking levy. And I think that's nice to hear that people do seem to agree with the board that that is a measure that we should pursue. The sad thing is I think we don't think it's a silver bullet, and on its own it doesn't solve the entirety of Cambridge's traffic problems, particularly those coming in from the district. We do need other measures as well. The A428 Charleston corridor is one, and Histon and Milton Road are the other. So, as the Chairman has said, it's a package of measures rather than one silver bullet. And then I'd like just to move on to Matthew Danish's comments and just pick up some of those. And actually, I think Mr. Danish, there's a lot of things we agree with you on, actually. At the bottom of your note, which you didn't read out, thank you, because of shortage of time, you say that the PCCPs and the workplace parking levy are on the right track. So thank you very much indeed, we agree with you. Your second bottom line says we want great protected cycleways. I'm a complete passionate believer in that, and I think the Greenways project, which I want to hear much more about, is an example of that. And then if I go back to your top paragraph, I mean, we don't run the buses, obviously, it's the bus companies that run the buses. All we can do is create a situation where they will do the modernising measures that you want. And I'm not the spokesman for Stagecoach, and I'm not going to be, but I think during the course of 2017, quite a lot of what you want, like contactless fares, the tap in, tap out, you will find coming.
because we are now creating an environment in Cambridge where Stagecoach says Cambridge is an area worth investing in. We had a very interesting meeting with Martin Griffith, who's the Chief Executive of the whole of Stagecoach UK, and he basically said, I look across the UK and I decide which cities I am going to invest in, and I've got to decide whether Cambridge is one worth investing in or not. And I think we are creating an environment slowly where he's beginning to say, yes, Cambridge is an area of investing in, and it would be wonderful if we get his contact this technology next year. We ourselves, in the City Dual Board, as you know, by Easter or later next year, we're going to be launching an app which will be telling everyone the real-time position of every single bus. Again, you didn't mention that. I mean, I think that's an important thing in making bus travel more attractive. We've got the workplace parking levy. If we decide in January that is part of the solution and we go out to consultation on that, that will give us some money, and that might be able to be spent somehow. We'll consult on that in improving buses. Park and rides need to be improved for bus users. And then the most important thing from my perspective representing the district is that there was a press release from Stagecoach, which is on their website, and which I've quoted frequently, saying that if they consider this as an area that's worth investing in, they will change the district's fare zone, which at the moment only has 2 fare zones, which means once you get more than 10 miles out, it gets really quite expensive to come to Cambridge on a bus. And they will have 3 fare zones, an intermediate fare zone, which would be really good. It would make big settlements like Cotland, Northstowe, and Camborne probably take £6 or something like that off their weekly bus fare. So there is a lot of things that can all come together and make buses really attractive, and we want to create that environment, and there are lots of things we are doing, all of which need to be done to come together. Thank you.
So, and that was nearly as long as your question, Mr. Danish, but I think it underlines the fact that where we need to get to is bringing together a range of measures which include the points that you raised about changing the way buses operate, but that fundamentally, as Stagecoach or other bus operators will also say, the congestion isn't just caused by passengers getting on and off, it's caused just simply by the weight of traffic. And certainly if we come up with a package which addresses that, which gives people incentives not to park in areas like Milton Road and to use park and rides and other measures, if the board itself looks to implement a package of positive measures at the same time as the package that is being put together, then we will reduce the demand for cars coming into the city. But our fundamental issue is that we believe as a board that we need both, and I know some residents disagree with that, and we will continue to have that dialogue. We appreciate that if residents have input into schemes, as on Milton and Histon Road, that even if they make comments, they may still hold the view that they don't believe in the scheme at all. But we want to have that dialogue, and by bringing forward the package, which, as Mr. Carpenter said, has to be assessed for its risks, because we are bringing together parking policies of interventions, funding from the city deal, funding potentially from a workplace parking levy. Actually delivering all of that incurs considerable risks, but one of the things at the centre is we are committed to tackling congestion, and we're committed to improving transport and reducing air pollution. And we need to continue to look at a package of measures whilst being in a position that before we take decisions finally on Milton Road, Histon Road and the other roads into the city, we will know broadly where we're going on the main demand management measures. So life isn't simple, it's full of risks, but we're determined to tackle congestion by a combination of measures, and we're also determined to ensure that if we do make changes to roads, that those are roads that have got a good quality environment that people enjoy living on. Okay. If I could move on to Richard Taylor's questions. Number 9. Thank you.
So I'm Richard Taylor, 2 declarations. I live in a house on Milton Road, and I've previously worked with board member Nigel Slater. Now, I've come to the Assembly and the Board before asking you about the powers which you've been delegated by the councils and which ones you're going to exercise and which ones you're going to decline. Now, you've published a summary of infrastructure decision making, and that document contains the incredible statement, the officer who is responsible for making decisions, the officer will be responsible for making decisions on trees on the public highway. Now, that statement has been questioned because this document that you've produced doesn't really have any weight. You haven't brought it to the board and approved it. One of those who reportedly has questioned it and said that that statement is not true is the member for the County Council, Councillor Bates, in response to a question from Councillor Manning. So I've come here seeking clarity. Now, I understand that the officers will always act in line with the policies that you set out at the board. But remember that the officer in question here will have two sets of masters. He'll have the board and the county council. They might not be in line. And I'm really seeking some clarity here. So if you are seriously delegating this decision to an officer, I've then got something solid to campaign on and lobby you to say, please don't do that. I want accountable councillors to be taking the decision.
Okay, thanks. Graham Hughes on the trees.
Thank you, Chairman. A simple answer to that question, and the point that Councillor Bates made to the question raised by Ian Manning at the County Council is the situation in relation to the schemes that are being developed under the City Deal. So essentially, the office you refer to is me, so I'm the Executive Director of Economy, Transport and Environment at the County Council. So for County Council-led schemes, there are a whole series of delegations to me that I can exercise. However, I would always exercise those in consultation with members as appropriate, and indeed I don't have to exercise those delegations at all. What is different though in relation to the City Deal schemes is the County Council has delegated to the City Deal Board the responsibility for delivering those schemes. So the answer that Councillor Bates gave to the County Council, the question raised by Councillor Ian Manning, is correct, which is that issues about the location, the number of trees, landscaping, etc. will all be made by this board and not by me. So this board will make the final decision on the schemes for example, Milton Road and History Road, and that will include landscaping proposals.
So the board will take responsibility.
Thank you. I hope you've correct the document then. So I'd also like to know about the arrangements for upcoming workshops and local liaison forums on Milton Road. Now, I'm coming here as a last resort. I've been to the local liaison forums meetings myself, and I've asked my local councillors what's going on. At the last local liaison forum for Milton Road, the forum didn't make the arrangements for the workshops, didn't set the dates, and didn't finalise who was going to be allowed to attend. They let that decision be made, presumably by email, after the meeting. So I would like to know what the arrangements are, and in particular they mentioned, or I think they decided to give some places to members of the public at the workshops on a first come first served basis, and they said that they would be putting a list up. So I'd like to know when that is going to happen. I think it would be useful just to tell you that tells you one aspect about the way that the Milton Road Local Liaison Forum has been running. When it's been considering resolutions, which I don't know whether they're going to come before you, they're not on your agenda today, but the Assembly considered them without them being on their agenda, but they weren't published in advance of the Local Liaison Forum. So the Local Liaison Forum isn't running in the same way as any other local government meeting would in terms of making decisions or access for the public. So that's why I've had to come here to the board to ask what's happening about the future meetings and the workshops.
Tanya.
The local liaison forums are communications forums. They are not a public decision-making meeting. They are there to engage the community on scheme design and to hear from them, and as part of the stakeholder engagement for schemes. So the rules and practices that would apply to a meeting like this one wouldn't apply to the local liaison forums. And on the workshops, those will be notified once those have been organised.
I mean, it wasn't that. The benefit of the local liaison forums is they make generally their decisions within their constitution. So I'm not in a position to answer for them, and I wouldn't want to, because I want them to have the freedom to operate with a degree of flexibility. Being August, they weren't really in a position to announce a series of dates, but I would expect quite shortly that those dates will be very public. And we obviously want to make sure that there's public meetings and that they're available to all to attend. In terms of how they decide who should be on the forum, they have again got delegated authority to make choices within their constitution. So we'll publish the dates shortly, Richard.
Where should I look for them?
Well, we will make sure that they're so publicly available that you won't need to dredge to find the dates. So if you move on to item 5, we've got petitions, and we have the petition that was also presented to the County Council. So we've got a petition from Charles Nesbitt in front of us, and a report from the discussion at the County Council, which was also discussed by the Assembly. So what I've proposed to do is to also take Councillor Roger Hickford on this item, even though we've got your agenda only to start the next item. And also I think Councillor Scott wants to contribute from the Milton Road Local Liaison Forum, and also as a county councillor. If we, in terms of the order, so basically if we look at the recommendation, we've got a consideration by the board of the issues raised by county councillors, and we've also got some proposed wording that came both from the resolutions from the Milton Road Local Liaison Forum, and also some wording which came out a week ago from the Assembly. So what I propose to do in terms of order is that if we start with Councillor Hickford in terms of the Assembly, and then ask Councillor Scott to contribute.
Chairman, might I suggest that actually Councillor Scott's first, because then
that's very noble of you.
Only chivalrous, but it would make sense because we comment on the resolution.
All right, if that's okay, Councillor Scott, then thank you for coming along.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. And I should just emphasise that I'm here in accordance with the briefing note on local liaison forums, which says the chairs of the local liaison forum will be invited to speak at executive board and assembly meetings in order to ensure that local liaison forum views are captured and responded to. And consistent with that, my understanding is that both the Histon Road Local Liaison Forum and the Milton Road Local Liaison Forum will be an agenda item both on the Assembly list and on the City Board list for each meeting, which I emphasise does not mean that either I or my counterpart, Councillor Mike Todd Jones, will be appearing on every occasion at the Assembly and the Board, but that if it's a standing item, then it means that we can indicate whether there are matters that we should be drawing to attention or not. In relation to the operation of both forums, local liaison forums, Councillor Todd Jones has asked me to speak because he is unable to be here due to work commitments, and his deputy, Lillian Rundblad, is absent at the present time in Heidelberg. I just emphasise that both our local liaison forums have co-opted residents' associations, and we're extremely pleased that that has been able to be done, and emphasise that the residents' associations have been co-opted to the local liaison forums on the basis that they are not to be taken to be endorsing any of the plans that are being put forward, but they do wish to cooperate and they wish to contribute local knowledge and experience to the local liaison forum and to the workshops. I would like to make some report on the workshops as well. Anybody who has ever emailed me about any matter in particular will well know that I respond, if not immediately, and it usually is immediately, I certainly will respond within a very short time, even if it's 5 a.m. or 2 a.m. And people, as I say, who've ever emailed me know that that is the case. So anybody who has emailed me or contacted me in any way at all, whether it's in the street, in person or not, will have had the following information about the agenda. The agenda is to be produced within a very short time, possibly by the end of next week. I shan't be pinned down to that, but it'll be around about that time. The workshops will be commencing in mid-September through to October. And this is both for Histon Road and Milton Road. The Histon Road ones will be taking place on a Monday evening. The Milton Road ones will be taking place on a Tuesday evening, one after the other, so that people can attend both if the number quotient enables that to happen. Every effort is being made to involve local people as far as possible, and I'll give you an example of that. We do see the importance, and I make it very clear to everybody here, this is not the only group that's important, but because they're one that's been raised as an issue. The Cambridge Cycling Campaign, we will be asking them to advise us of members who are local, so that any involvement of that group will be local people. That is, people local to the Milton Road area, people local to the Histon Road area. And that's going to be our effort in relation to any experts that are involved in those workshops, that they have local connection. Because that's absolutely crucial as we see it, the expertise and the local involvement and knowledge. And the reason for the delay in these workshops going ahead is because a very real effort is being made on the part, I emphasise, of the officers to ensure that landscape, public realm, trees and verges will be an integral part of all those workshops. I just wish to emphasise also that the concern and the agreement is that in addition to the design workshops, we will be having, I need to find the exact wording, key element workshops that will be looking at the roundabout at Elizabeth Way and the Arbury Road shops and Union Lane to get local input into both those aspects. And for Histon Road it will be the intersection at Huntingdon Road. And may I simply conclude by referring to two matters. First, it has been said at our local liaison forum that we will be involved in the process of ensuring that any questionnaires that go out in relation to consultations will have come through the local liaison forum, so that we have an opportunity to make real input into the drafting process of those consultative documents. And I emphasise that to put it on the record here. And in relation to the petition on trees, it can't be ignored that over 3,000 people contributed to that petition, and the 3,336 are in that realm. And at the County Council, I emphasise too, it was not just those of us who are in the local north area who spoke on this very important petition, but there were councillors from outside Cambridge City who were equally concerned. One councillor raised the matter that if over 3,000 people speak, then it must be paid attention to. He is from the Fen area, and councillors Hunt and Bailey also spoke very strongly in relation to the need to ensure that Milton Road, and I would add the Histon Road, although that was not mentioned because it was not in the petition, need to retain a tree environment and a verged environment. So I conclude on that point by saying that we were very pleased that the petition was brought to the council and that it raised the 3,000 that were necessary for the debate. It's only the second one, at least in memory, since that process has been in place, that there has been a debate triggered by over 3 1,000 people. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak, and we will be on the agenda next time, but make no bones about it, for the City Deal Board meeting and for the Assembly meeting. Whether Councillor Todd Jones and I will be there or not, of course, is another matter, but if we do have matters to report, then we will certainly be doing so. Thank you.
I've just got a supplementary question, I mean, and a comment as well. In terms of the agenda, it's specifically, you're specifically invited whenever there's any item on Milton, or in Councillor Todd Jones' case, Histon Road. We think if there's additional issues to be discussed, then we will consider putting an agenda item on either our agenda or on the Assembly's agenda. So, but the particular right is to contribute whenever the issues relating to your road are raised, Councillor Scott. In terms of just a supplementary, just to be clear, I think it would be useful for the board just to be reminded of the wording of the resolutions that were passed, just so that we're clear, because I know one was to seek independent input on landscaping, but if you could just share the wording, I just think it's useful that it's both public and also that the board is fully aware of those two resolutions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the resolutions, and I'd say that my understanding of the way that local liaison forums ought to operate is that if resolutions come before that local liaison forum, then they shan't necessarily be published before. On this occasion, what happened was these resolutions were put forward by the residents' associations that at that time took their places on the board, on the local liaison forum, and they brought the resolutions forward. Bus lanes in the distance from Oak Tree Avenue through to Hurst Park Avenue, the local liaison forum, Milton Road, does not support any proposal that there be 2 bus lanes on any part of Milton Road, and in particular the stretch of Milton Road from Oak Tree Avenue to Hurst Park Avenue. The local liaison forum, Milton Road, calls upon the City Deal Board to A. Remove double bus lanes from its proposal for the section from Hurst Park Avenue to Oak Tree Avenue, that is, to revert to a maximum of 3 motorised lanes instead of 4, and B, remove the diagram or plan from the City Deal website which represents there being a 4-lane carriageway, or make it clear beyond doubt where it appears that this diagram or plan has no relevance to the proposal. This, when this came before the Assembly, and of course Councillor Hickford's here to speak to this also, but I just should say that the issue was raised by the officer who was present that one could not remove it because it was a part of a consultant's report. If that is so, then what we do ask is the point that was made at the Assembly by the Deputy Chair of the Assembly, that the problem is that this diagram remaining on the website in the way that it does is, if I could put it in some terms, potentially incendiary. It's at the minimum misleading, and in the middle it's discombobulating, because people come to the website, they see that, and they are thereby persuaded that there will be 4 lanes coming down from Oak Tree Avenue to Hurst Park Avenue, and if they definitely do not want 4 lanes, and the diagram, as I say, leads them to a belief that there will be 4 lanes, and if that is not the case, then it's, as I say, discombobulating for it to be there in the way that it is, without at minimum a very clear indication that it is not what the City Deal Board is contemplating. Secondly, independent landscape consultants. Landscaping, public realm, trees and verges must be an equally important part of the design work, consultation and processes in relation to the City Deal projects, and in particular the Milton Road project. Milton Road Local Liaison Forum calls upon the City Deal Board to A. confirm that independent Hay consultants, expert in the field of public realm, landscaping, trees and verges, will be appointed immediately to the City Deal project and be an equal part of the Milton Road project as the engineers, and B, consistent with A, appoint a firm of independent urban architects to develop new design options for Milton Road streetscape. Now, at the Assembly, the issue was raised as to funding. I was actually very pleased to hear the board and confirm that there was money within the City Deal monies in relation to the trees issue, and therefore it would seem to me that it's consistent that there's money to provide this independent landscaping consultant. If I'll end on that note, but I should have said in my earlier disquisition that we, Histon Road Local Liaison Forum and Milton Road Local Liaison Forum, did want to put on record our appreciation for the work of Richard Preston and also the work of Molly Robertson, because they've been our contact and our support in terms of the Local Liaison Forum work. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. No, I just appreciated that because it has been discussed. I heard Mr. Taylor say that these hadn't been sort of published beforehand, but they were obviously fully discussed at the Local Liaison Forum. Okay. So essentially what we've then got is that, and then the views and discussion that we had at the Assembly. So thank you, Councillor Scott.
Thank you.
So if I could invite Councillor Hickford to add to that.
Thank you, Chair. I'll add as much as possible, but I think Councillor Scott's covered a lot of it. First of all, the Assembly noted the report and the comments raised by the county councillors during the petition at the county council. With regard to the Milton Road Local Liaison Forum resolutions, we did support the resolutions at the Assembly, but we did have reservations about the B of each resolution, as Councillor Scott has actually commented on already, so I won't go into much detail with that. There was a question from Anne Hamill, and we had much debate on the question. That question is actually before the executive. It is part of your questions there, just to remind you. And the last bit of it, will the executive board make a commitment to having an evenly spaced avenue of mature flowering trees and green verges that are minimum 1 metre wide on each side of the whole length of Milton Road? We actually discussed this at length and decided on the wording that's in front of you, which I believe you all have, which is basically for an aspiration rather than an actual commitment. So I hope that's all.
So, in terms of taking this forward, including that the Assembly met last week, what I'm going to propose to the board is that we listen to any comments that members of the board want to make, but that we, as the Assembly did, we note the resolutions agreed at the Local Liaison Forums, and actually I'm going to propose that we agree with the Assembly on agreeing to note and support them apart from the Part B in each of them, as the Assembly did. But that what I'm going to propose to the board is that we respond, but we do that not today, but we respond both to the petition, to the Local Liaison Forum and to the Assembly before the next Assembly's meeting. So we set ourselves a deadline to respond in the next 2 or 3 weeks, but that we respond at the same time to the petitioners, to the Local Liaison Forum and to the Assembly. So that's my recommendation to, as the Assembly did, to note the report and the comments raised by county councillors during the meeting, to note the resolutions agreed by the Local Liaison Forum, apart from B on each, and to commit to responding within the next 3 weeks to the petitioners, to the Local Liaison Forum and to the Assembly with the views of the board. Councillor Hickford?
Sorry, Chair, could I just have clarity on a couple of things? First of all, we had a recommendation that the Greater Cambridge City Deal Executive Board made a commitment to having an aspiration for an avenue of mature green trees on each side of Milton Road, whilst maintaining provision for cycling and buses. I'm not quite sure that came out in what you've just said to start with.
Well, you've asked us to make that commitment, and I'm saying that we will make our commitment in writing in response to you.
Okay. And fine, just the other thing for clarity is, obviously with regards to the resolutions, there was general support with reservations. So will the board come back either supporting or not supporting, or coming back with something else with regards to Part B's of both of those?
Because they didn't reject Part B.
Well, we will respond to both Part A's and Part B's.
Okay.
But I think what I'm saying is that we take the principle of the local liaison forum, and I hope we will at least be credited for listening, by agreeing to Part A today of both of the items on the local liaison forum. That's my recommendation. It being short notice, I haven't discussed this, and it would be wrong if I sort of had a pre-meeting to discuss this, so I'm going to invite Councillor Burkett to contribute. There's been no discussion on this issue before this meeting.
And I may have missed some papers, but I haven't even seen the Milton Road Local Liaison Forum resolutions before this meeting, so I can't refresh. And of course I'm happy to note them, and I know everybody's concerns. I don't know what the word supported means if I support a resolution, but I'm afraid on the second page I can't just leap to agreeing to immediately, what's that mean, tomorrow morning, appoint independent paid consultants. I need more notice, and I need to think about that, and I need to hear Mr. Hughes's views. And I'm not really sure it's right to immediately, presumably tomorrow morning, remove double bus lanes from this section. Don't we need to think about it a bit more? I mean, I was given this piece
sorry, Councillor Burke, where's the word immediately?
Well, okay, not on the word. The first one is immediately. You're right. Confirm that independent paid consultants, expert in the field of public realm, landscaping, trees and verges will be appointed immediately to the City Deal project. And you're right. Now I read it. Removing double bus lanes. I mean, is that what we do when we do these consultations, these plannings? Get a piece of paper 10 minutes ago and instantly remove double bus lanes? That's not process management to me. So I'm not saying I disagree, but I'm just saying I find, and I'm very happy to note all of this, but to agree it at 5 minutes notice doesn't seem to be a very good process management.
Well, we were assured that A doesn't exist in any event, that there are no double bus lanes. We were assured of that.
Well, if there are, then we can't remove them, so it's
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. I think the sensible way forward actually is to accept A and B and to take the recommendation before, as the chairman has said. There's obviously been much discussion both at the local forum, not just about...
Well, so just to be clear, because we can get strung up in different bits. The proposal is to accept A and A, but not the B's.
What does accept mean, Chairman? Do you mean make a decision?
Well, I'm happy to explain my position in more detail, but I didn't mean to interrupt you, Councillor Bates. I just want to be clear that what you're endorsing or commenting on was supporting the A item on each half of the local liaison forum's proposals.
What I was referring to today, which was to note the report and comments raised by the County Council during his debate.
Yeah.
And I'm on a slightly different page.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I'm with you now.
I apologise if that's a bit confusing to everybody. I'm on this piece of paper, which is actually from the Assembly. So my A and B is relationship to the decision of we have notification from the Assembly,
Well, I think the problem for the audience is that they don't have a copy of this in front of them.
Okay.
It's been shared.
I appreciate that. I do feel we need some time to actually look at what the liaison forum has said and what the Assembly has said and come to a sensible view and the way forward. So my view would be to, if you like, responding in due course, giving that due consideration from both the local liaison and the Assembly.
Okay, any more comments from members of the board?
Chairman, just to be clear on my position, going back to Ms. Councillor Bates' piece of paper, which is the one that has gone from the Assembly, I would be happy on 1A to note it. I would be happy on 1B to note it without the word supported, because I need more time. And on number C, I'm very happy with that recommendation.
Okay, well, we haven't been in a position to discuss this before today. That has been the problem. I've intimated that I support B in the Joint Assembly's recommendations, but that what we need to do is to discuss this matter and to respond. And so what I propose is that we do note the report, we note at this stage the resolutions, and we commit to respond in writing. And my target would be to respond within 2 weeks. Okay?
I'm content with that approach, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry we haven't been able to get to a decision this afternoon, but what we will do is respond both on the local liaison forum comments, on the resolution of the Assembly, and also address the issues raised by the petitioners. Councillor Smith wants to...
Can I just have a point of clarification, please? At the A428 local liaison forum, which both myself and Councillor Burkitt were at about 6-8 weeks ago now, there were about 20 resolutions came out of that, but have those resolutions been discussed in the same way as these resolutions are being discussed?
Well, the reason for that, Councillor Smith, is that there's an item on the agenda, and as you'll be aware, the A428 is proposed to be on the agenda in the next cycle. So we would extend an invitation, as we would, to the chair of the local liaison forum on that A428 consultation, and to contribute to the next meetings of the Assembly and or the board.
May I suggest that, because obviously this has been rather sort of thrown at you today and it's making it very difficult for you to make a decision about it, since those resolutions at the A428 LLF were taken some time ago, you know, that you have early sight of them so that you are actually in a position at the next meeting to, you know, debate them and make a decision on them, since they're already there. They're not going to be thrown at you on the day.
That's very helpful to us, and it's also, I hope, helpful to people who've put so much work into the A428 local liaison forum. So we appreciate that, and we will ensure that we have more time before we are drawn together before the meeting in the beginning of October, after the Assembly's met late September. Okay. So are we clear about the recommendation in terms of the wording? But I do commit to responding promptly to the petitioners, to the local liaison forum, and to the Assembly. But we need to resolve a view between the 5 members of the board, and we will do that within the next fortnight. Thank you. And thank you to the petition, including to Charles Nisbet, who led it. We hope that we can do justice to a number of the issues that have been raised, both in the petition and by the local liaison forum. I'm certainly committed to do that.
Thank you.
And if we can move on.